programme structure for the undergraduate degree is that we have 2 trimesters per year, and these typically run from October to end of January, and then end of January through to usually mid-April. And typically you study 3 modules per trimester. In terms of live contact, so in real time when you're working alongside your peers and staff members, this is a wee bit variable. So your timetable will give you the specifics of it, but it's usually between about 3 to 6 hours per week per module. So we have a system called CellCat, and you'll find out a lot more about CellCat in your time at GCU, and that generates a personalised timetable. So once your registration is successfully completed at each year, you get a personalised timetable. And this is typically finalised by week 1, because as you can imagine, there are sometimes small changes that are needed. In terms of assessment, again, something we are very, very proud of within our programme is that we have a real diversity of assessment. You're not just coming in here to do lots and lots of exams or write, tons and tons of essays. We are really, really proud of the fact that we've got current diverse assessments that utilise a range of real world skills. Of course, we have things like lab reports, we have things like presentations, but we also have audio-visual assessments, so preparing things like posters and infographics, because not everyone in the world is going to sit and read an academic paper, so sometimes we have to find ways of getting our information across in a more accessible form, such as in a short video or using a poster. And I think it's very important for me to stress at this point that in terms of entry into honours level, which is at our level 4 of the programme, there isn't a sort of minimum grade average in order to get in. We're not like some other universities who might require a B average or a 65 average to get into honours. In theory, if everyone passes all their modules at level 3, everyone can progress into honours, which again is something we are very, very committed to. One of our unique selling points is the fact that our students can graduate with specialisms, and I should stress that these specialisms are entirely optional. So every student who satisfies the requirements will graduate with the BSc Honours Applied Psychology. However, depending on the modules that a student chooses in the 4th year of their programme, level 4 of their programme, and the topic of their final year empirical project, it is possible for students to choose to graduate with a named specialism, which could be in either counselling, psychology, health, forensic psychology, or sport and exercise psychology. If you're interested in learning more about the specialisms, again, that's something that you could maybe pick up with your personal tutors, usually by the time you get sort of halfway through 3rd year or into the beginning of the 2nd trimester of 3rd year, because again, it's entirely optional. There's a whole bunch of reasons you might want to leave with the specialism. There's some reasons you might not want to leave with the specialism, and that's why we keep them as entirely optional. But yeah, we'll talk a lot more about that, particularly when you get into the 2nd trimester of your 3rd level. But again, if you want to start having those conversations early, people like your personal tutor can give you a bit of guidance with that. One of our unique selling points is that we have optional specialisms. What does that mean? It means that students who take a certain set of options in level 4 and do certain topics for their final year empirical projects can actually leave with BSc Applied Psychology brackets, either counselling psychology, health psychology, or forensic psychology. And one of the things that's nice about having that option is that it just gives you an ability to kind of personalise your award a little bit, to reflect exactly what it was you did in your final year. These specialisms are entirely optional, And as I said, it's mostly driven by the optional modules that the student chooses in their final year. So if you're thinking potentially about any of these specialisms, you'd maybe want to start speaking to your personal tutor around about, maybe February time in your level 3. Before you make your optional choices. And there's a bunch of reasons you might want to do the specialism. There's a bunch of reasons you might not want to do the specialism. So that's why we keep them optional. And again, if you're remotely interested in this, then please, speak to your personal tutors and speak to the relevant module leads, usually around about the sort of February time of your level 3. At level 3 of the programme, as I mentioned previously, the structure is broken into 2 trimesters and you study 3 20-credit modules in each trimester. In the first trimester, which typically runs from October until the end of January if you include the assessment period, you'll be studying applied research methods in psychology, because research methods really does underpin everything we do as a discipline. That's where the kind of scientific part of psychology really comes from. You also study personality and individual differences, which is probably what many people think of when they think of psychology. And then we also look at the introduction to biological, cognitive and developmental psychology. Now these 3 modules are really, really important because they don't just kind of underpin the stuff that you do in trimester B, but they also underpin an awful lot of what you're going to go on to do at your 4th level. So, it might be a bit difficult to see why things are relevant and see how things fit together within that first trimester, but believe me, as you get into trimester B and as you get into level 4, all of the things that you do across those modules will start to make a lot more sense, and you'll be looking back to a lot of work that you've done in these modules as you move forward. In trimester B, the 3 modules that you study are social psychology, applied human cognition and physiology of behaviour. Again, all 20 credit modules, and they typically run from the end of January until around about the middle of April, mid to late April. And these modules are all part of the sort of BPS, British Psychological Society, core curriculum, because if you think about it, at the end of level 3 is when you actually get the BSc Applied Psychology if all of these modules are passed. So that's why we have to cover such an intensive core curriculum, so that the BPS are satisfied that if a student was to decide to leave at the end of 3rd year with the BSc Applied Psychology degree, that they had been assessed on all of these core components. Of course, the vast majority of students, when they pass all of these modules, they choose to stay on to do the honours year in 4th year. So I want to talk to you next a little bit about the assessment structure involved. As mentioned previously, the academic year is split into 2 trimesters with 6 core modules, and what I've given a breakdown here is the general assessment structure. You'll notice that there's quite a few online exams in inverted commas, and individual module handbooks will give you details on how these are likely to be structured. So for example, is it going to be 2 short essays? How long are you going to have to work on the assessment between the questions being released and the submission deadline? So when you get attached to the modules themselves, and when you see things like the module handbooks, you have the introductory lectures, all of this stuff will become much clearer. As I mentioned previously, one of the things we're proud of within our programme is the range of assessment that we have. So yes, although there are several lab reports and online exams, what you'll get a feel for is that there's a bit of a diversity in the topic and structure of these assessments, even although the label might look very, very similar. There's also things like an ethics proposal assessment, which is going to be really, really important, because when you get into your final year empirical project module, you will have to get ethical approval before you do any independent research. So starting to work on those kind of transferable skills at level 3 is really, really important, so that you get the feedback from that assessment to help you when you eventually come to submit your empirical project work. Similarly, we've got things like a funding proposal, which is again really, really important, because if you go to work for charity in the future, one of the things that you're going to have to do is try and secure funding. Or similarly, if you're applying for a grant or a bursary or a research grant to try and go on and do postgraduate work, you will be writing a funding proposal. So again, given an opportunity to do that within the kind of safety of a module where you're going to get constructive feedback, it's really, really good to get the opportunity to do that now at the end of your level 3, rather than maybe leaving that towards the very, very end of your honours level. So the key thing with these assessments, in terms of finding out word lengths and deadlines and all that important nitty gritty, is when you get attached to the modules, to look really, really closely at the module handbooks, to look at all the supporting information that comes within those module sites, to best understand, because on the surface it looks as if they're going to be really, really similar, but there are actually some quite important differences across these assessments. In terms of assessment, and this is just a very, very rough guide, I've included a link to the university regulations themselves, but the key points here are that we try to provide feedback within 3 working weeks from your submission. So the point here is that we try to stagger the assessments so they're not all at once, and that way you get an opportunity to use feedback from sort of one assessment to another. So for instance, if you've got a lab report in the first trimester, we would aim to have the feedback with you before you would then submit another lab report in, say, the second trimester. Or similarly, if you do an essay in trimester A, we would want you to have that feedback before any other essays in trimester B. So it's not so much feedback as it is feed forward. Feedback comes in lots and lots of different ways. It's not just what comes along with the grade. So answers to questions are feedback. Replies to email are feedback. Taking part in discussion boards with your peers, talking to one another, all of that is feedback. So yeah, it's important to recognise that just that we have a diversity of assessment method, we also have a diversity in how we deliver feedback. Grades and feedback are provisional until we have what are called progression and award boards, and this is where our external examiners and other members of the university community outside of psychology basically ratify everything that we've done to make sure we've done it by the book and fairly and evenly, and that way, if there are any problems, those can be kind of ironed out and recognised. For what's called the first diet, which is the kind of first pass of all the modules and assessments, that normally takes place in kind of mid-June. And then there's a second diet, which is normally in early September, for students who have maybe missed assessments the first time round, or students who maybe have to resubmit certain work. So it's all designed to kind of try to give you the sort of highest quality and fairest experience. So yeah, the progression and awards boards are really taken quite seriously to ensure that we're doing everything properly and to the appropriate standards. So yeah, all grades and feedback that are received until they've been confirmed by one of these progression and award boards, it's all provisional until then. Things like your degree award classifications, decisions about whether or not you pass a module, these are all based on sort of weighted averages of your assessments. So the modules that you're going to be studying typically have two assessment points, and sometimes it's weighted 50-50, sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 60-40. So it's those weighted averages that determine whether or not a student passes a module, and therefore that has implications then for the number of modules that are passed, and ultimately degree classifications. But as I said, I've included a link there to the formal university regulations. To give you a breakdown of what the marking system looks like for the BSc Applied Psychology, we mark on a scale of 0 to 100, and the way it breaks down roughly in terms of words and numbers is that an excellent is anything above a 70 at every level. Doesn't matter whether you're level 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's been marked above 70, it is excellent for that level, and that would normally align with a first class award. A very good is sort of between 60 and 69, which is usually upper 2-1. Good, 50 to 59, which is usually lower second or 2-2. Satisfactory is between 40 and 49, which would typically align with a third class honours. A borderline or a borderline fail is between 35 and 39, and there's possible implications there about whether a module is going to be passed or not if you get 35s to 39s. A fail is between 30 and 34, and that probably means there's going to be implications for passing the module or progressing up the levels. And then, of course, unfortunately, we have to have a clear fail, which is equal to or less than 29, and that generally means that there will be implications for the module pass or indeed progression. But as I said, any grades that come out are always provisional until they're ratified by the exam boards, and then following the publication of the exam board decisions, the progression and award board decisions, you can always follow up with your personal tutor if there's anything you're unclear about. So I wanted to finish by welcoming you again to the BSc Applied Psychology here at GCU. We are the University for the Common Good, and that ethos goes all the way through our programmes, and hopefully you'll see lots and lots of examples of how we are trying to use psychology for the common good throughout our work. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to work through this presentation. I've made a note of my email address and also the email address of Dr. Lana Ireland, who's the Deputy Programme Leader, and you'll meet Lana and I a lot through the time that you're with the BSc Applied Psychology programme. And I've also put down the email address of our programme coordinator, who again is an absolutely crucial member of staff and someone you'll hear from and be in touch with quite a lot throughout your time at GCU. We also have our level tutor address. The level tutor for level 2 is Leslie Ann McRae, but the most appropriate email address to use is the generic level 2 tutor address. In terms of finding out a wee bit more about us, about who we are, what we do, I've listed 3 of our social media profiles, and that's a great way to kind of get in touch with students who are already on the programme, and finding out a little bit more about what's going on right now amongst the staff and student communities. I wish you all the very best for the remainder of the bootcamp, and I look forward to working with you in the academic year ahead. I'd like to finish by thanking you for taking the time out to work through this presentation. I've listed my email address here, and also that of Dr. Lana Ireland, who's the Deputy Programme Leader, and you're going to be hearing quite a lot from us throughout your time at GCU. In various contexts. I've also listed our programme coordinator, who is absolutely invaluable, and again someone you'll have a lot of communication with throughout your time with us. We also have our level tutor, Dr. Monica McNeil, and I've listed the level 3 tutor email address, psychl3tutor at gcu.ac.uk, so that again, for matters at a level, you can always speak to Monica. And again, these roles will all become clearer, the longer you're at GCU, certainly through induction week. I've also listed some of our social media presences, and these are quite useful for kind of getting to know your other students, getting to know the staff, and also finding out a little bit more about what's going on within the department right now. So, please feel free to check those out at your leisure. I'm really looking forward to working with you throughout your time here at GCU, and I do really, really wish you all the very, very best, and I look forward to meeting you in a more live context.